I remember one of my first hospital, I had a patient satisfaction scores when I inherited the step down floor that were in the low double digits. We were now creeping up over the first year. We were in the like 95th, 96th percentile. And the president of the corporation came and looked and was rounding on our floor. And she kind of quizzed me of why my goal wasn't 100% that year. Why was it 97? And I said, well, we went from this to 95 and now 97. And then she looked at me and she said, if you flew a plane and it only landed 97% of the time correctly, would you fly on that plane? And so she made me realize that I need to strive for 100% and we can make 100% because we want that outcome.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the one and only CNO podcast. I am Roseanne Rosso, editor-in-chief of Nursing Management, 5-time CNO in the New York City area, and thrilled to talk to Joben Rieth today. But I'm going to let David introduce himself, his role here, and
Hey everyone, I am in the presence of greatness here, two multiple time CNOs. I'm not a CNO. I play one on a podcast though, but really we started this show because we saw that there just weren't a lot of venues for CNOs to exchange information, to hear best practices, what worked, what didn't work, how did they get along with their bosses, how do they manage down, how do they manage laterally, how do they manage up. And it really is only as good as your peers and information and your community. And so we really wanted to create a bigger community for CNOs because they're doing such great work. And then also for aspiring CNOs, people who look at people like Joben and Roseanne and say, I want to get there, right? And so how do you do that? And so with me today, I'm just extremely excited to introduce Joben Rieth. He is a 4-time CNO. He is a CEO. He is an Eagle Scout. He is a board member. And you don't say he was an Eagle Scout because I'm also an Eagle Scout. You say you are an Eagle Scout because you're always an Eagle Scout. He is one of the top 100 nurses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area when he was working there. He is an MBA. He is a BA. He was a bakery owner. The list goes on and on. I have 6 pages of his background here. So I'm just really, really excited to talk with Joben. Joben and I first met a year and a half ago, and there's certain people that kind of leave a mark on you immediately. They talk about presidents where it's Bill Clinton or things like that, where when they walk in the room, they just have this big presence. And I remember I met Joben at a coffee shop at a breakfast place, and he walked in, big, strong guy, perfectly dressed, as you can see now if you're looking in video. And he actually told me that he's living in a mobile home because he had just driven into the area. And I was like, how does a guy this tall even fit into a mobile home? And then changed to a suit with the tie. And just, he looked at me in the eye, firm handshake. He was right on time the whole time, looking at me when most people are looking the other way, they're checking their phone. I saw him later at the Kansas ONL, and he was sitting in the audience. Everyone else was on their phones. He was taking notes, detail, always focused. And I just thought, I love being my own boss, but if I had to work for someone, I want it to be Joben because this is a guy who just cares about people. And nurses that I've worked with, they've told me the same thing, that he comes up to them all the time. He shakes your hand, he knows your name, and it's just this warm personality, and not just a personality. He's accomplished so much in his career. So I'm really excited to kind of get into the nitty gritty with Joben. And thank you so much for taking the time.
Wonderful. Thank you for all those kind words. I'm excited for this opportunity as well. And thank you, Dave.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joben. So you've done a lot, right? And so we can start from any number one of places, but always in this podcast, we like to talk about how people transition from working bedside to being managers, because it's this interesting transition. You probably become a nurse because you actually don't want to deal with bureaucracy and you don't want to fill out evaluation reports and things like that. You actually want to help people, and you probably don't have those skills to manage and deal with all the corporate stuff. And so people who are successful both as bedside nurses, which clearly you are, and then also can be successful in leadership positions, there's such a really interesting set of tools. So I'd love to talk to you. I think if I'm looking at it pretty correctly, you became a director pretty early on in your career. It's almost like a year or two after you started nursing. Is that right?
That's correct. And it's interesting how I got into nursing. I was really more interested in the animal side of medicine. I was a pre-med, pre-vet at Oklahoma State University. And after finishing my undergrad, I decided to do 2 years of missionary work, and it turned into around 2 years. And at that time, I had to have a small procedure, which was supposed to be outpatient, which turned into 2 weeks in a hospital. And I thought, wow, I really like what these nurses are doing. I like that atmosphere. I love the side of medicine and people in general, and that's how I got into nursing. After I left my missionary work, I went into nursing school and thought I would be an ICU nurse, in which I did start out as an ICU nurse. Really thought I'd be a flight nurse for a couple of days a week and be a farmer the rest of the week. And we always think we got everything planned and figured out, and all of a sudden one day after probably being within the organization for a couple of years, they asked me to be the director of a step down floor, and I was kind of shocked a little bit because that wasn't my plans. And so then I kind of moved into that role and went on forward into leadership and administration. And I never thought that would be my role. Again, I had other thoughts and plans, and I've really enjoyed it since then. I became an ICU nurse in a level 2 trauma facility, and really loved the speed and the gadgets and of ICU nursing, and really dove into it head first, and really became more involved in just learning the balloon pump and learning the different things about an ICU nurse. And I think that helped me jump into the charge nurse role quicker. Not
Yeah,
that I was looking to jump into that role quicker, it's just an opportunity came up, and I've been fortunate to be part of a lot of great opportunities over my career, and that's kinda a little bit of how I got started in leadership.
that's great. Yeah, you went from charge nurse very quickly and then became director of nursing and did that for 5 years in Oklahoma. And it's sometimes hard because these are people that you're peers with that now you're managing presumably, right?
Right.
And that's a different dynamic. And I know this was over 20 years ago, but principles of management that you first realized then that you've developed now, can you talk to us about, what are the things that you learned about how to manage people, how to influence people, how to guide people? What's caused you to be successful in your career in terms of
Well, I think that's a wonderful it's a great question because no one really prepared me for management more than I mean, yes, they prepared me for, union training or financial training or spreadsheets, Excel, things like that. But I always say to new leaders and my leaders when I go places, no one prepared me for that sometimes our position as a leader, not only does it get a little bit lonely as you continue to move up, not that that's a bad thing, but you definitely want to find your support network for that. But no one prepared me for majority of the time. Some days you're a counselor, you're a mentor, you're a sounding board, and oftentimes you're spending a majority of your time on non-hospital work issues. You become that financial advisor for someone who's going through financial crisis at home. And I remember sitting in my office one day, I'm like, did I sign up for this? But it is part of who we are as a leader. And so I think early on, I realized that that's who we are, and that's what we really majority are, is helping people get through their day. And yes, part of it might be because of a charting issue, but some days I used to joke that some days I think I spent 80% of my day helping staff with marital issues or financial issues. And then, I always tell new leaders too, be ready because it shouldn't always be about the money or the title. I mean, that is important, don't get me wrong, but as we, jump into these roles and we look for these roles, sometimes, especially as a very new supervisor or new manager, director, you look over there and there's Julie and she makes 3 times more than I make, and I'm like, "What's going on here?" And I always prepare people, it always works out, and there are always a lot of perks with our roles, and as we continue to move up the ladder and there's opportunities that come that we might not be ready for or know about that is just part of growing in our leadership role, and it all comes together later on. And so um, I think that's helped me be strong and continue my leadership of being there for our associates, being that open door, knowing them, like you said earlier, calling them by their name and letting them know that you're there for them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's this phrase, people won't care about what you know until they know that you care. So I think just this, yeah, a lot of things you're helping people with marriage and finance and sitting down and just kind of caring about them. And then when it's time for you to offer advice or give some feedback, they're actually going to care about that because they know that
mhm.
you care about them. So you clearly have a charisma about you and a warmth about you. Not everyone has that. Are there specific things that you do to kind of create those bonds with your team? Is it meetups? Is it rounding? Is it one-on-ones? Is it texting them? Is it Facebook Live? What are the tools kind of in your tool belt to build kind of bonds with your peers and with your team?
I think for one is I'm very much of a rounding leader. I'm always rounding in the different departments. I mean, I think it's important that we work and get our work done in our office, but it's also extremely important that we're out and about with the frontline staff and
Yeah.
just sitting down at the nurses station, sitting down at this, in their office, just chatting with them. I don't believe in having my one-on-ones in my office. I believe in having my one-on-ones in their office, in their atmosphere. I try not to come with an agenda, which is sometimes very hard for me, but I want them to have that time for them. But they also know that they don't have to wait for a one-on-one, or they don't have to wait. They can text or call me anytime. I do kind of joke with our OR director here. He likes to call me about every Friday afternoon around 3:30, and that's when we catch up. And if I miss that, if for some reason he doesn't call me on that Friday, I text him and say, "Do you not need to catch up on anything?" It's just become our trend and kind of what we do, and I feel like if you're open and flexible and still have boundaries. I mean, I don't want if they can wait till Monday, then I think we should wait till Monday, not over the weekend. I work on that very hard as well because a lot of times I like to come in on a Sunday and work out on the afternoon, and I try not to send any emails requiring that my leadership has to respond to. When I go to places and I start new places, I definitely work with my leadership and tell them how I'm an open door. You can text or call me anytime, but also you don't have to respond to my emails if they do come across on a weekend, unless I maybe text or call you. But otherwise, try not to respond to them. But over the years of even me saying that, people still feel like they have to respond.
Yeah.
So I work really hard on not sending any emails over the weekends or after hours unless it's just a need to.
I'm just so struck at what a relational leader you are. I mean, I've done so much research and writing about relational leadership, and you just explained, all of it in how you lead. It's really kind of impressive. I was actually a little worried for a while when you were talking about spending 80% of your time on like marital issues and financial issues. I'm like, oh boy, he needs some boundaries.
Yeah.
But then you were like, I have boundaries. I was like, okay, all right. I feel better now. Oh, anyway, is because not everybody is like that. And David, you said that before. Like not everybody will sit down and talk to their staff and their people about those kind of issues. So that's a special person that takes that on. So I do applaud you for that. I just literally wrote an editorial on loving leadership. And I
Mm.
thought, oh, this guy's living it, right?
I
You're
like
a
I
living
like that.
example.
I like the loving leadership. You know what? Probably 10 years ago, is people would say the servant leadership style,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I agree with all of that. I'm here for a reason, and I'm passionate for what I do, and that's who I am, and that's I like healthcare, and I like working with people. I am very competitive, and so that's why I like my staff to was all be on the same team, where we understand our vision and our
Mm-hmm.
drive, and we'll have some great outcomes if we do all that.
Yeah, totally agree. And that has to come first. If the workforce doesn't trust you and feel safe and feel like you care for them, the outcomes are not going to be there. So I think that comes first, and you're living proof of it. So, do you think that your style was what propelled you along these jobs? Because you have such a history of operational excellence in your roles. And when you think of operational excellence, you don't necessarily think of relational leadership, but you have somehow married these together. How did you prove yourself to get all these progressive jobs and operations and nursing? So you've been a COO, a CEO, a CNO, you've done it all. How did that all happen? Like how did you prove it?
I think from the very beginning, when I have people talk to me about how can they get in this seat and looking at growth in their future, I tell people I think it's you have to be passionate. You're wanting to advance not only the quality and the outcomes, but also your leadership role. And I think getting involved in the hospital's committees and getting involved in more than just the bedside care is kind of what got me, I think, moving in the right direction of leadership. I was very involved in my first hospital as in committees and organizations, very involved in the community within organizations as well and activities to the point a group of us in executive suite put together we ran marathons together and just doing things together like that. They got to know me in a different way. I got to know them in a different way. And that helped me take on more responsibilities, I would say. But I also went to my leadership and said, hey, I'm ready for another department. I'm ready for more. Give me more. And I think that helped them see, he's really driven. He's ready to take on more. He can do it. And that helped me as well. I think with my leadership style, for one, grew up with a hardworking family as in agriculture, but also in medicine. And so I worked with both my parents in their careers and be involved in their careers. I like what I do. It's what I think helped me reach some of my goals as becoming a CEO or having these great outcomes that we had with our patient experience scores or our, when the survey like joint commission comes in and last year they might have had 3 or 4 issues. This year I'm shooting for 1, if not 0. And so that has helped, I think, also my leaders that I report to see that competition a little bit in me. I remember one of my first hospital, I had patient satisfaction scores when I inherited the step down floor that were in the not single, but like low double digits. We were now creeping up over the first year. We were in the like 95th, 96th percentile. And the president of the corporation came and looked and was rounding on our floor. And she kind of quizzed me of why my goal wasn't 100% that year. Why was it 97? And I said, well, we went from this to 95 and now 97. And I know she didn't quote this, but she did say it that day. And she said, if the mail was delivered only 97% of the time, would you still send your packages through the mail? And then she looked at me and she said, but if you flew a plane, if you would ride on a plane and it only landed 97% of the time, correctly, would you fly on that plane? And so she made me realize that I need to strive for 100% and I need to keep pushing for, we can make 100% because we want that outcome and that, the best outcome for our patients and their family members. And so I think those kind of things help me. Those initiatives, those leaders that I had in the past, giving me different views, pushing me a little harder, helped me to become a leader that I am today. I've been very fortunate with all my positions and I've been fortunate to work in a variety of states and a variety of diverse organizations. And I've been fortunate that I've kept relationships at each of those facilities where they call me, we bounce things off each other. I call them, we bounce things off each other. But that's also how I've been called to my last couple facilities was from someone that knew me from the past that said, hey, we need someone to come over interim and help us out for a while. Would you be able to do that? And so that's how I came here. That's how I went to my last facility. My last facility, I was planning to stay for 3 to 5 months. I stayed 3.5 years. And so um, I think it's another thing I always tell my leaders, don't burn bridges, always keep great relationships with your peers and the other organizations because you never know when you might need them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, I
great.
totally agree with you. The last 20 years of my career, I never looked for a job. Like they just came to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, that's how
But that's all network building,
yes.
for sure. I have to go back to this patient experience thing. Like maybe your boss at the time was not impressed with a 97th percentile, but I am. So I'm very curious. How did you go from 10 to 97?
So
How did
I'll
that
give
happen?
you a more current example. So for this organization, one of our floors, medical, we've kind of hovered the percentile with Press Ganey around 10 to 15 percentile. But for the last 6 months, we've been hovering now 75 to 77 percentile. And we've made other changes and strides in all the other areas as well. We have some departments that have been 100 percentile for 6 months straight. And so partly I think again is the culture. And that's something I do feel very like I think if I was to say I'm most proud about is is helping change culture, improving team morale, and building those high performing teams. Again, I just think for me, it's listening to who they are, what their needs are. For example, I wasn't here 2 months, and someone came to me when I was rounding one night, and they said, "Can you bring back chocolate pudding?" I'm like, "What? Chocolate pudding? Well, we only have vanilla now." And I was like, "Well, of course." That's easy, and I kid you not, I got 3 thank you notes from staff, right off the bat, because the next day we had or not, the next week, we had chocolate pudding, and I don't know what happened in the past, but it's just I think, again, listening and helping that change that culture and also recognizing their great outcomes and who they are and what they do is very important. So I think that's again helped me as well here and things that I think that's again back to your question. I think that is also once you get that culture, again, if you have happy people, as you know, or happy associates, you're going to have happy customers. And I think that culture is changing here, and we all say that, and I'm proud of that. It's taken a team, of course, but we're definitely seeing that with our scores and patient experience. And also, I think it's important to not only recognize your staff through like the daisy and the bee and the good catches, which we've introduced that since I've been here, but also professional recognition rewards. So for the first time, went for a Beacon Award for our step down floor. It's interesting. They have never done that here. I've done it at other facilities. For the very first time, we were platinum. We just heard that result a couple weeks ago. We were 1 point from silver, which of course are very competitive. So I said we need to call back and see why we missed that 1 point and what we could do different. But I think that's important for the staff to see that we get, they're getting those awards. They're being recognized for what they do. And this is just another way to help them see that the great things they're doing and the great outcomes they're doing in these sometimes struggling times with staffing or whatever that might be. And so I think those helped as well make the shift in the culture, but also make the shift in our outcomes with a patient experience.
That's great. So it's interesting that one thing I've noticed in your career is you have gone to multiple different hospitals, and that's great that people have recruited you because they know you by reputation, and that's great. Word of mouth is always the best, right? If someone can refer you because they know you. One thing that I've always found in my career is when I've switched jobs, that kind of first 100 days in the seat has been so important, right? Because you have no second chance to make a first impression, right? And you have a lot of momentum, you have a lot of buy-in. You've come in, they've seen you as this person who's been successful, and so you actually have the ability to get that buy-in to set big goals and affect that change. Whereas as you get harder on, it's maybe a little bit harder to do that, or the course has been set. And we have a lot of listeners today that have maybe switched careers. They're looking at or they've switched to a different hospital to kind of go up, or maybe their first time as a CNO in entirely different hospital, entirely different organization. What would be your advice for them in terms of like, how do you start off? How do you get the ball rolling once you hop into a new?
I think for one, first of all, when you're looking at a new opportunity or especially if you're changing organizations, I think you need to be discerning an approach over that opportunity, meaning evaluating any role I believe in is do you align with their values, their mission, and their vision? And then that helps me when I go places. I mean, I'll research all that. I'll Google the organization and I'll try to pull up any press releases or anything like that, of course, and try to figure out. But for me, when I'm looking to make a change, I look at the vision, the mission, and the values. But I also kind of course work with my family on this is the aligns with our future goals and overall for our family. And I would say those same things for anyone looking to maybe look at different opportunities. I'm a firm believer in helping people grow, and sometimes that means they might have to go somewhere else. And hopefully one day we get them back, right? But also I always tell my leaders when they say, Susie is a charge nurse forming it, she's leaving to go to the cancer center, which is still within our organization. I'm like, well, that's fine. She's within our family. She's happy. That's the nice thing about healthcare is that we can change. And if that means I'm going to work nights now or weekends or change departments, that's okay, as long as they're in the family. But then sometimes staff will come to me or leaders will come to me and say, I'm looking for this opportunity. I had one organization, I was interim, and this individual came to me and said, I think I want to apply for the CNO role. And I said, well, do you have a CV? Well, no. I said, well, let me look at your CV. Go back and put it together and let me look at it. And then let's see what that looks like. Well, when she presented it to me, I said, this CV does not say leadership to me. It says education. Is this really the route you want to go? Is leadership in or more education route? And I said, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you try to figure that out. I can go through the processes of because they used an outside firm for their recruiting of this position. And I said, I can help you with kind of the steps. I've been through it numerous times, what it's going to be like, meaning interview processes, things like that. But your resume doesn't talk leadership. It talks education to me. And so we worked through that, and we met on it quite a few times, and then she met with her husband, and then she came to me a few weeks later and said, "I think education is the route I really want to go in life." And I
Yeah.
said, "See," I said, "we just needed to talk about it." I said, "Doesn't mean you can't be a CNO one day." I said, "I would like for you to maybe keep your foot in this side of the world, not that education is not." She was working towards an education opportunity within the organization. It wasn't outside the organization. So we continue to visit about that. And I think that's been very beneficial for her to kind of go through that process and really figure out what she likes. For me personally, I like nursing, but I also love operation. And I remember back probably 10 years ago, I had a coach. My corporate office said, we think you want to give you a coach for the next year. And one of the things that we all know that they like to do is multiple assessments, but also we'll do a 360. And so we did a 360, and I, of course, picked directors and other executives, but also corporate executives. And of course, I didn't know who filled out what part of the 360, but I realized I'm like, maybe I do focus too much on operations because I can see over here the nursing people are saying I don't focus enough on nursing. So that helped me as a person and as a leader say, okay, I've got two roles really. I need to focus as much as I can evenly or equally for them all. And that helped me. Like, I think just sitting back and with the director looking at the CNO role or education role, is sitting back and just like, what is today? What information am I getting back about what I really want to do and what I'm doing now? I think that helped.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And any advice for people starting off in a new role? Like, how do you make that great first impression? Do you have a first 100 days playbook, or is it really just I'm going to show up the same no matter what, or think about what your big goals are going to be, or how do you kind of you set off on the right foot as people for people advice for people who are starting off in a new position?
I think be who you are from day one. I also tell leaders, especially new leaders, we're on stage almost, all the time. 24/7 we're on stage. So people are watching you. If you have mood swings, they see that. If you didn't comb your hair today but you usually do, they're going to say, "Oh gosh, something's wrong today." But we're always on stage, always be prepared. And so from day one, you have to be prepared and be who you are and be open and willing to get your hands dirty and be out there with your associates. I think you'll be very successful.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Like, you are definitely on stage every minute of every day. Maybe if your door's closed, you might get a
Right.
break for a
Oh, but
few
they
minutes.
still say his
But I
door
hated
shut.
to close my door.
Yeah. Mhm.
Dave, you started to talk about this and going to different jobs and how do you evaluate whether you want to make that move or not? Were there any jobs that you were offered or even like looking at that you said, this is not right for me? Like it didn't fit your values or like, did that actually, has that actually happened or have you been lucky your whole career? As you looked at other jobs, the values worked, the culture worked, the whole thing worked. Was there but I was just curious if there was ever a time when you thought, nope, not for me.
Not really. I've been very lucky. I've been very blessed in all my leadership roles and all the organizations I worked at. Like I said earlier, I still have connections at all of them. I still bounce things off of them, especially in my previous role when I was the CEO for the critical access facility. We really I didn't have a mothership. I didn't have sister hospitals to reach out to. So I reached out to my peers from other organizations, which was great help. And so I've been blessed. There was one organization that reached out to me a couple of times about being their CEO, and I was pretty excited. It was a small critical access hospital, very, very busy, delivered about 50 babies, 60 babies a month for critical access.
Yes.
That's quite a bit,
Yeah.
very involved. in their community. And I had met with them a few times. I just didn't agree with some of the comments that the board made during my interview. Even though I was excited to build a hospital, I wanted to be part of that. And I mean, that's always on quite a few, or at least my list of things I want to do. And so, but I just kind of met with the board chair afterwards, and I just said, I think that this opportunity is not for me at this time. And they did ask me during my interview, and I was very blunt. They said, "What do you think about the facility?" And I said, "Well, your your social media, your marketing is pretty lacking. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of clean up the building and inside the building itself and the appearance." And I was just very transparent, and they kind of they liked that overall, but I know that I didn't really agree with some of the responses from the board members. So I paused on that and went a different direction.
Well, good for you, because not everybody would do that. Some people would just plow ahead, like, oh, this is the next thing I want, and not pay attention to those cues. So I think that was really smart of you, actually.
Well, I hope all leaders and all of us as we get older get to the point in our careers that we don't have to jump on every opportunity, that we can be picky.
Mm-hmm.
and and that's been fortunate for myself and my family. We've been fortunate that I can be picky, and like I came here as an interim as well, and then after about 6 or 7 months we kind of met on staying for a long term. And so I did have other opportunities. There was a couple other interviews that I had going on as interim, and one being in Kansas and one being outside of Kansas. And so I think that's the nice thing of where I am in my career and in our life is I can be picky.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't want to jeopardize who I am or change of who I am just because a board member wants something different and I don't agree.
We're very lucky to have you. It's interesting about your career is that you've not only been a CNO, but you've been a CEO. And we always like to ask our guests because you can be the best manager of nurses, but if you don't have a good relationship with your CEO, with your CFO, you're not going to last long, right? Your ability to affect change and to help your nurses is directly correlated to your ability to advocate for them, and that involves relationships up and laterally. Any best practices that you'd like to share for how to form a good relationship with your peers, with your C-level peers, and then also with your boss and with the board?
Again, I think no matter what, and I know I've said it a few times, is just being open and transparent, being there for their when they need something, but also just be there to listen, and also stick to your values and and who you are and what your goals are. And I think with the CEO CNO relationship, you definitely have to a trusted partnership built on very much mutual respect, open communication, and of course, focusing on patient care and the goals and the outcomes of high quality. I think you have to be on the same page, and a very transparent dialogue between the two is you'll be very successful. And unfortunately for me, I've been a COO, a CNO, and a CEO, and my CEO here has been a CNO, COO, and a CEO. We like to bounce things off each other quite a bit. And
Wow.
when I was interim, I would go to him and say, "Okay, I know that I'm probably just gonna run this by you," just mostly because I'm like, "Did you know?" And what, those kind of things. And I feel like that's helped our relationship. And I think that's also helped me. I love operations, and I never knew that.
Yeah.
I remember when I first was asked to take over operations, my very first CNO position, and we were building a 3-story medical office building. And I was like, I love this. I love organizing and getting the team together and the construction side of it all. And so I've been very blessed to be part of some very big construction projects. And so operations is reported to me for most of my career, meaning
Mm.
pharmacy, EVS, food service, you name it, lab. So I've been very
The
fortunate.
pudding department.
Pardon?
The pudding department.
Yeah, yeah. Chocolate pudding. I'll get you. I'll get your chocolate pudding.
All right, here we go.
The nice thing, I would tell my CEO here as interim, I'm like, if I'm getting out of my lane, please let me know. I said,
Mhm.
because I like both sides. I like all of healthcare in general. And I've been over these departments almost my whole career, so it is sometimes tough to me to just to focus on nursing. And he greatly understood, and he he's never told me to get back in my lane. Between him, the CEO, and myself, that's easy for me to get out of my lane and we can talk about it. What
Yeah.
I have to work on is getting out of my lane with the directors that don't report to me.
Mm,
And I have to focus on that. I don't want to burn bridges with them. I don't want to upset them. I don't want them to say, who is my boss? Is it
yeah.
you or is it my
Mhm,
boss I've had for
mhm,
Yeah.
many years?
mhm.
And so that's been a juggling act for me.
Maybe because out of your lane can be an abstract term. Is there an example that you can think of when you were out of your lane? And then how did you realize that? And then how did you get back in your lane? And how did you repair that relationship?
Well, it's for example, when I and now granted, and this is what I tell everyone when I go places, just because it worked in Dallas when I was in Dallas doesn't mean it's going to work here. But a little bit of what worked in Dallas could work here. And so I'll start conversations when I hear things like an imaging or I see EVS issues around the hospital, and so I have to be very cautious of how I approach those directors and work with those directors, and so they don't get upset and say, "How many bosses do I have? Do I have 2 bosses?" So some of it that I've had to be caution about is where policies that maybe hadn't been updated for quite a while, and I'm like, "This doesn't make sense. This isn't kind of the best practice anymore," and it's imaging and not any of my areas, and so that's kind of where I've kind of veered out of the lane, and then I've had to bring it back and just figure out a different approach to say, maybe it's time we look at this policy, and here's some examples I can get you from other organizations so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then it goes well from there.
Yeah, using your influential power rather than, positional power.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
very good point. I like that a lot.
yeah,
I like
yeah,
how you
totally.
phrase that too. Like, hey, have you thought about asking it as a question as opposed to a specific
Hmm.
statement that could be taken as an order? And then people are saying, well, whose orders do I take? You or my other
Yes.
boss? Or like that? No, I have 8 bosses, I have no bosses.
Well, I remember when I first became a director, I inherited multiple departments over the next 5 years. And at one point, one of my departments reported to the VP of cardiology, and I reported to the CNO for all my other departments. And I would walk past the VP's office for cardiology to go to the CNO, who we ran marathons. We were very close together. And I worked with her for like 4 years. And he would stop me when I come back by and goes, "Why did you go to her office?" And I said, "Well,
Mhm,
because it's a nursing related issue." And I felt pulled and
mhm,
I was put in a rough spot there when he would question me on why I would go to her office and not his. So
mm,
I think about those things of my past, and I don't want my or the associates where I am now to feel like that either.
right. Yeah, those matrix relationships are killers, and all systems, that's how they are now.
Right.
Like, you're in a matrix, and you have to navigate that. It's all
Mhm.
great when all the bosses, are on the same page, but when they're not, oof.
And I'm fortunate here because all the bosses are on the same page with me, and I'm
Mhm,
on their same page, and so
mhm,
they're very okay. A lot of times with me saying, I'll go to one of the other VPs about it regarding a
mhm,
department that's not mine, and they'll be like, "I totally understand, I agree," and so we
mhm,
kind of forward there. But so
mhm.
I always work with that VP as well.
Yeah.
That's great.
So you mentioned earlier some great accomplishments like the patient experience on several units in different places, going from very low to very high. And you've also talked a little bit about some operational excellence achievements that you've had. But what are you most proud of in your career over all these positions and all your influence? Like, what are you most proud of?
Well, I think you figured out I'm pretty highly driven and a competitive person, and I definitely take pride in building the teams and going into places because pretty much everywhere I've been, the culture's been pretty low, morale is down,
Mhm,
turnover is high,
mhm,
vacancy rates are high, and so I
mhm,
get pretty excited to work for organizations like that
mhm.
because I've been doing this so long and I've seen good outcomes from some
I'm
of
envisioning like a Western film where the town is messed up, overridden by the crime, and comes in with the hat and the music and just cleans it up and then rides away on to the next town. I think that's what's going on.
That's kinda exactly, good, I love it, yes,
I
that's
bet you ride a horse too.
Right.
We used to have horses, but not anymore. Yes, right.
I
So,
love that work too, that turnaround work,
mhm,
when it comes to
that's what I
culture.
really enjoy that part.
I love that too.
Meeting new people. It's interesting because some of the things you said, Dave, earlier on about your first 100 days, when you're interim, people always ask me, like, what's your first 100-day what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I don't have 100 days as an interim. I need to get in there like pretty much week 2 and start
Mm.
making adjustments or, recognizing what needs to be worked on and starting coming up with a plan. And so that's how I kind of always work. And I do have to step back sometimes, especially when I'm a permanent person in the permanent role, and step back and say, okay, my 16-hour days is who I am. It's not who everyone is. And my work list could be a mile long, and I feel like I can get 10 things done today when my team maybe only could do one thing. And so I sometimes have to step back and say, okay, what can my team get done today? I have to remind my team sometimes to say, let's take a pause. You're implementing. So back to one of your original questions, Roseanne, is patient satisfaction. We didn't do hourly rounding. We don't do,
Bedside shift report?
yes, bedside shift reports. So which we've kind of, that's changed in the world. But so there was hourly rounding and like charge nurse rounding. There was, we didn't do discharge phone calls.
Mm.
There was a lot of things like that that were best practices hardwired at many organizations for many years that, I've been a very a part of all my organizations. And so those are things that help, I think, make the changes here regarding that patient experience that we talked about. But I think that's definitely helped with the culture as well, but also help with what I'm proud of and what is coming from some of the changes that we've made. We've seen some great customer experience outcomes. We're seeing some recruitment retention starting to stick
Mm.
from some of my changes. And so I'm proud of those as well. I'm proud of a lot of things actually, but definitely I would say culture, up the improving morale. For example, those Beacon Awards, you have to have good morale. You have to have a good culture just for one section of that part of that award. And if you don't, then you won't place any kind of silver, bronze, or
You're such a relational leader. My goodness, you just exude it with everything you talk about. It's pretty amazing. But I'm going to dig into something you just said about patient experience. And you weren't doing hourly rounding, and you weren't doing bedside shift report, and you weren't doing nurse manager rounding and discharge calls, and the list. Making that change and having it stick is so hard.
yes.
I mean, really hard. So, did you actually make those changes and make it stick somehow? Like, what's your magic?
So, as you know, when you implement too many new initiatives, you see your press Ganey, your scores go up and down, right? And
Mhm.
that's that roller coaster, which we don't want. And
Mhm.
I've been here 14 months or so, and so we came up with here's our year agenda for rolling out initiatives. And so that's, I think, helped for one. The leadership was on board, not only my leadership, but across the system. I presented my year plan to the board as well. They were on board as well. So part of it was we're going to do more hands-on. We're going to film any kind of change so then we could send that out through email through a presentation that myself or another director is the one presenting the change. When it went to more patient experience initiatives, so for example, like they have never done this here before where we did a mandatory in-person patient or customer experience skills fair. We did that last year for all 1,500 associates and it was mandatory. So we went over things like 10-foot, 5-foot rule. We went over the hourly rounding, what that is about. And that was just one area that we covered hourly rounding before we rolled it out. I mean, we went through multiple staff meetings. We talked about, why we're doing this, the importance of it, why rounding makes, decreases falls, decreases things like that. And so we kind of gave them the why, and then we did multiple education, and then we slowly rolled them out. And so I think that helped to make it stick. We had the buy-in from our leadership, from supervisors, directors, and up, and I think that helped make it stick as well. And so that's, I think, again, helped us achieve our goals and continue to see our patient experience go up and up.
That's awesome. That's great. I love that you're a relational leader, but then also an operator, because either
Mhm.
people have the right side of the brain or the left.
Mhm.
But okay, how do I actually do a project plan? Or people can actually create a project plan and a tracker and a dashboard, but then they have no ability to actually affect that change or get people to use it because you can't relate to people's. That's great that you have both sides of that brain. So
Yep.
we always kind of like to end a podcast with, the reason that you've gotten your different roles is because of word of mouth recommendations, right? Because your peers said, we got to hire Joben. We need the sheriff to come in and clean this town up, right? And so for all of our CNOs or aspiring CNOs, they would also love any word of mouth recommendations from you. Is it a favorite book that you read? Is it a great tool that you implemented, either a digital tool or a physical tool that really helped some of your scores? We had a previous guest talk about a digital dashboard that they implemented that they cook into Epic that really helped with comms.
Yeah.
Is it a podcast besides this one? Is it a words of advice? Any kind of, is it a notebook that you can't live without, right? Any great tailor that you'd recommend for your amazing suits? Anything. What do you want to share with people?
Well, I say definitely. I mean, there's a few things I would give some examples of what you just asked. And first of all, be the leader who measures success with how much time I feel like you can give back to the nurses, so they can simply just be a nurse. And I know if you're maximizing different initiatives out there like AI and things like that, ambient listening, I think as much time we give back to the nurses to be a nurse, that's great. So I continue to work on that. I think if you would say some personal recommendations of maybe out there that I like, we use Qualivis, which is a healthcare staffing for travelers, and so that helps us with our staffing needs for more on a temporary basis, as you know. But they also have a permanent side, and there is an expense to that. And sometimes we have to gamble as leaders that we could, maybe spend this 10,000 or 5,000, whatever it is. Hopefully, we get something in return. And we did take this gamble with Qualivis and use their core hire, which is their permanent side of hiring staff. And pretty much immediately within the first 30 days, we had a return. I would say a return on our investment. We had two high quality candidates right out of the gate, and we've already successfully hired one in our first. I would say 30 days, but there was about a week or two where we had issues on our end of getting that information to them in their platform. And so we had to do it manually, and then we didn't do it as fast as we probably should have. So I would say the first 2.5 weeks we had two candidates, and so one is hired, one's still in the process of interviewing, and we had another candidate apply today. So I feel like that's something I wasn't aware of, that they had that on their in their system of a permanent side like that. So that's been very helpful. You mentioned a book. I just finished reading Free Lunch by Rex Ogle. It's a true story about a sixth grader navigating food insecurity and his struggle with home, and it is powerful.
Mm.
Wow.
And I just started to read To Kill a Mockingbird again, and everybody keeps making fun of me. I don't know why. Um, I'll let you know next time how it's going. I just bought it yesterday.
I
Yeah.
just read Catcher in the Rye. I'm trying to read all my books that my son's
That's on
raising.
my next list.
So
Yes.
I read Catcher in the Rye, which is good. And then my older son, he told me, I asked him what book he was reading, and he said, Call of the Wild.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
I read that. And then I was like, yeah, I'm on chapter 19 and I'm almost done. He said, no, chapter 19 has just started. And I said, well, what book are you talking about? He said, Into the Wild. And I said, you told me Call of the Wild. So I had to read Into the Wild, but both good. So
Right. Right. No, that's wonderful. That's
yeah,
good.
yeah. So,
I'll
well,
write this
great.
down.
This has been really, really insightful. I have a whole page of notes. Check out Qualibus for direct hire, free lunch for a good book. Do one-on-ones in the person's office, not your office. That's great. Get involved in committees. Don't send those weekend or after hours emails because people will reply even though you tell them not to.
Yes.
Run marathons together. I don't know if everyone can take that advice, but that's nice.
This has been great. I appreciate both of your time as
Right.
well. And I look forward to future conversations.